Thank you for joining us. This is Platform. I'm Ruth Aguwele. Welcome. The spotlight in the past 2 days has been on Nigeria-UK relations, of course, following President Bola Tinubu and, of course, the First Lady of Nigeria, Oluremi Tinubu, historic visit to the United Kingdom for a state visit as guest of Their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla at Windsor Castle. Also, we hear the president is the first Nigerian leader to be hosted by the British monarch at Windsor Castle and the first by the Nigerian leader in 37 years. Now, beyond that, Nigeria and the United Kingdom share a deep history of ties and, of course, a special bond. The purpose of this visit is to strengthen bilateral relations and explore avenues for collaboration on issues such as immigration, trade, investment, defense, cultural exchange, in addition to various memoranda of understanding and agreements that will be signed. The diplomatic agreement between Nigeria and the United Kingdom, experts say, has taken another turn following President Bola Tinubu's visit, now recalibrating stronger partnership under the reign of His Majesty King Charles III. So on Platform, we are exploring the futuristic opportunities for both countries while looking at already existing relations and, of course, the quest for enhanced partnership across diverse areas of interest for both UK and Nigeria. So Nigeria-UK relations, how do we build bridges for prosperity? And our guest is Professor Mukhtar Imam. He's a professor of international relations and diplomacy and also directing staff, National Institute for Security Studies. Thank you so much, Professor Imam, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, just before we bring in our panelists, we'd like to let you in on who our guest is. We'll take his profile. Professor Mukhtar Imam is a political scientist and an international relations expert. He's a researcher and consultant of high repute. He has authored numerous scholarly articles published in reputable local and international journals. Professor Mukhtar is a master degree holder and also a PhD holder in international relations. His consulting career spans engagements with several prestigious organizations, including the Center for China Studies, where he served as lead consultant, and the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, where he is a visiting consultant. He also partners with various international organizations and is the chief consulting officer of GMC Consulting Services. Professor Mukhtar is a fellow of the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, the International Institute of Corporate Administrators, and a member of the National Political Science Association. In academia, Professor Mukhtar Imam has held several key administrative roles. Now, he was formerly the head of Department of Political Science and Administration, acting head of Department of Mass Communication, and Dean of Faculty of Communication Management and Social Sciences at Penn Resource University, Gombe, here at Nigeria. He also served as a member of the University Governing Council and renowned for his charismatic leadership. And we'll leave the profile there. Thank you for being here once again.
Thank you.
All right. Our panelist is one of our correspondents here in NTA, a very vibrant Ayo Deji Makinde. Ayo, thank you so much for joining us on Platform.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Appreciate
Good to have you here.
Yeah.
And you've been following all the developments for the UK-Nigeria relations, talking about the president visit, so we'll get all the gist.
Surely.
Okay. So, Prof, congratulations. The last time you were here, you were a doctor. Now you are a prof. Congratulations. So, Professor, the whole talk, the spotlight has been on this UK-Nigeria relation, especially because of this historic time for Nigeria, the visit of the president. For you, when you put a narrative to it, what will it be?
Well, of course, the visit of the president to the United Kingdom is both symbolic and strategic. Strategic in all ramifications of diplomacy, particularly economic diplomacy. It is a visit that is, highly revered recognized and celebrated. Pundits would like to say so much adore and attention has been given to this. However, recall that even the President of the United States visited for the second time last year on an official visit, and it was celebrated. It was publicized highly. That speaks to the strategic posture of the United Kingdom in global affairs. Recall that this is an economy that is the second largest in Europe. This is an economy that has, over the years, shown resilience. This is an economy that historically has had a hold on global politics. Of course, we know at its prime, the United Kingdom, under the Pax Britannica, within the era of the Pax Britannica, controlled 2/3 of the world, from Danube to Scotland, from the desert to India. So it speaks to how great Britain actually has been over the years. And of course, without the UK, without Britain, even though we've seen Brexit, there wouldn't be an EU, you know. This visit is very historic, like I said, considering the ties that Nigeria has had with the United Kingdom, pre-colonial era, during the colonial period, and of course now in the post-colonial era. It is very symbolic to mention that even in the days of the Richard's Constitution, when Richard, of course, was the Governor General, and with the movement for the Welfarist Act in 1945-48, thereabout, Nigeria received enormous attention, and it was as a result of the push from, elites, political and intellectual within the Nigerian space, that the Crown decided to pay so much attention to the Welfarist Act, and hence we saw, the dividend of that in the establishment of the first school in the Francophone country, which is the Yaba school in Lagos, before the Makerere in Uganda. And so you see, when you take this, you'd come to the realization that Nigeria has always been a very strategic partner to the United Kingdom. Nigeria has always been at the heart of whatever conversation that the UK has. And so it is, again, like I said,
as a member of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We share that bond with other countries as well in the Commonwealth. So you see, unpacking all of these tends to play to one fact, that the relationship between Nigeria and the United Kingdom is one that has seen a trajectory where we can say it will, concretize into further, tangible going into the future.
All right, let me take on Prof, starting with Nigeria's strategic importance, or let me say Nigeria's strategic position in African politics and global politics. Since 1962 now, only 4 sovereigns, in quotes, have been privileged to have a state visit to the United Kingdom, with President Tinubu being the 5th. Now, if we put this in perspective, how would you consider Nigeria's position in African and global politics, considering the way we were in the 60s as the champions of Afrocentrism, through the 70s and the 80s when it was in the military era, and now that we have a Democrat in charge? People would say, considering the realities that we have on ground in the country, is a state visit a priority at this moment?
Well, you see, like I said, it is symbolic. Nigeria's posture in global affairs, regardless of shortfalls or pitfalls, can never be overstated. This is a country that, look, to sum the entire conversation up, when a Nigerian leader speaks, he doesn't speak for just Nigeria, he doesn't speak for Africa, he speaks for the black race. 1 out of every 4 African is a Nigerian. That's significant. And then of course this is a country where you have the country with the 3rd largest deposit of crude, the 6th highest deposit of crude, and the 3rd highest deposit of gas in the world. This is a country with 30% of the world's arable land. This is a country, the most populous black country in the world. some persons might argue that these are potentials and that we have not been able to match these potentials with the realities on the ground. However, coming from where you have just mentioned, the 60s, to where we are right now, you would agree with me that we have made significant progress. Yes, there is more to be yearned for. However, we have made progress significantly. That is indisputable, you know. And as far as Nigeria's posture in global affairs is concerned, you see, when Tafawa Balewa made the speech around his maiden address, talking about Nigeria's foreign policy being Afrocentric in nature, we must also bear in mind that Balewa at the time made, you know, took proactive steps to ensure that we had a defense pact with Britain, you would recall. That speaks to the volume of respect, the volume of, you know, repute and reverence we have for the United Kingdom and for one another, because this relationship is mutually beneficial. And so a state visit is important in every diplomatic space. Gesturing and posturing are key. Alliances are changing within the international system today, so it is critical that Nigeria begins to find a balance within that balance of power tussle going on within the international space. And of course, like I said, the United Kingdom is the second largest economy in Europe, and of course, with its historical antecedent, you can't take it away from the UK. And so it is important where we have such, you know, gestures. It sends a signal, a message to the world. This is what diplomacy is about. Recall that diplomacy is about bargaining, and that's why we call it diplomatic bargaining. And what you come to the negotiating table with is what you leave that table with. So for a country such as the United Kingdom to to recognize Nigeria's posture in global affairs, especially at a time where there's a new scramble for Africa 2.0, I think it is very, very important, and it should be prioritized as far as international politics is concerned. For those who would argue against that, they have no understanding of what international relations is.
And if we link that to the Nigeria current foreign policy that is hinged on the 4 Ds, democracy, demography, diplomacy, and of course diaspora, which we're seeing playing out in this UK-Nigeria relations, which it's also having this renewed focus because we're seeing both parties having to deepen cooperation in different aspects, from trade, investment, and all of that. Would you say the already existing relations in some of these areas have been yielding results, positive results, even as the president is there to amplify what is on ground?
Right, absolutely, absolutely. You see, the president's visit is to further accelerate what has been existing. The relationship, like I said, between Nigeria and the United Kingdom has been one of mutual respect. We have always met one another as kings meeting kings. Forget the rhetorics of Nigeria being the fantastically corrupt and all that coming from erstwhile prime ministers. These are statements that are made out of frustration, sheer frustration, and it's a reality on the ground, and an unfortunate reality that will drive just about anybody to make such an assertion. However, the positives are glaring. Our economic ties, for example, trade relations between the both countries have seen exponential growth over the years, year-on-year growth for about 11.4 to 14% thereabout, which is quite significant. It is enormous. And today, in March of 2026, we're witnessing an all-time rise of, trade relation amounting to about over 8 billion pounds. That in itself is quite monumental. It's something to pay attention to. We are also witnessing, of course, the rise of Nigerians within the eco space, particularly of fintech, in the United Kingdom. Nigerians are doing significantly well. You go around the world and you find Nigerians and people of African descent doing fantastically well in all these places. Of the 40% of medical doctors we have in the diaspora in OECD countries that are from 4 African countries, Nigeria topping the list, the UK has a chunk of that number. And it is because Nigerians feel culturally relaxed with the United Kingdom. And so, it speaks to the volume of respect we have for one another, like I said. It speaks to the nature of cultural ties and relations we've had over the years. But most importantly, it speaks to the numbers. numbers. The numbers, you see the reality of numbers skyrocketing when we speak about trade, and that is going to snowball into these trajectory we're witnessing today, where it is going to be multifaceted. We're just witnessing now the signing of the deal for the maritime safety, for expansion of our ports, and so on and so forth. So it speaks to how these countries, particularly the United Kingdom, see Nigeria as a strategic ally and a partner in relations.
Which is a plus.
Yeah, exactly, Ruth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, Prof, let's take a look at another narrative that has been trending in different platforms across the country since the decision to go to the UK by the president. Let's look at the choice of those on the team of the president, and of course what they're going there to do in terms of signing different bilateral agreements. Yeah. We've seen different ministers and state governors also on the team to the United Kingdom. How instructive is it to put it out there to Nigerians that this is beyond the Tea Party, because some of those things actually are intended to drive the 8 key priority areas of the president, because narratives have been flowing that it's just one of those parties, it's just one of those Tea Parties. But when you consider the team that's got the president, that's going as a sovereign, as the commander-in-chief to meet another commander-in-chief in person of King Charles, the first lady using the soft power to meet Queen Camilla, we have the president of the Senate going, the attorney general of the Federation, and all these high-caliber senior members. How instructive is it to put it to Nigerians that these people are actually going to key into areas that could benefit should I say, areas where the superintendent over in Nigeria at the moment?
You see, to put this in context, I'll return back to what I said earlier. When President Trump, the most powerful guy supposedly in the world, was to pay a second state visit to the United Kingdom, he was celebrated across the US enormously. This is the most powerful guy in the world, visiting the UK. The same gesture has been extended to our president. Yeah. No matter how lame you are, you should understand how very important this engagement is. This is an invitation to concretize a relationship that has been long-standing. This is an opportunity to ensure that the trajectory of what you're doing in terms of the multifaceted aspects which you mentioned earlier of your economy, of the society, is strengthened over time. This is to ensure that alliances are further strengthened, because of course the United Kingdom is a traditional ally to Nigeria, in as much as we in the diplomatic space have mentioned over and over again the need to ensure that we diversify with respect to our allies within the international system and ensure that we begin to build newer allies. We have never said jettison the traditional allies, because it doesn't work that way. You must ensure that you carry everybody along. These are powers that have been there from time immemorial. I've just talked about the era of Pax Britannica, that very tiny island controlled 2/3 of the world. So it's very instructive, it is symbolic, it is strategic that Nigeria is paying these visits at this time. Now to your question specifically, no president leaves his country to on a state visit with an entourage to prove to his partner that he has population. If the president is just handpicking people, what is he trying to do? To tell King Charles that there are a lot of black faces back home? No, I don't think so. I think the president is being strategic in all of the things that he does, and this is no exception to that. He has picked very carefully those on his team to ensure that they engage with their counterparts over there. Recall when my profile was being read, the mention of Westminster Foundation was made. The United Kingdom takes very, very seriously, very dear to its heart, Parliament across the world, and hence they initiated the idea of the Westminster Foundation. The principal mandate of WFD all over the world is to deepen parliamentary activities, and so we have been taking on a route around ensuring interparliamentary activities and so on and so forth. So the presence of the Senate presidents on that team is very instrumental. Recall that the president is also going to be engaging with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and then of course members of parliament as well. So there's the need to ensure that the parliamentarian is on that team, and the likes of the other people you find, the health minister, the all of the entire gamut of the team is strategically picked to ensure that whatever bilateral agreements will be reached in the United Kingdom will be followed through at the bureaucratic level. Because diplomacy is not what people think, that you just come sign papers, when that exchange happens and they shake hands, you think the money is just going to flow into your account. It doesn't work that way. That is where the job actually starts.
And that's a misconception over time, especially with what Ayo said about the entourage. We know UK and Nigeria already have this established in education skills, where you see the presence of, you know, institutions, yes, both physical and digitally. Absolutely. And also we see the aspect in agriculture, banking, financing. It spreads across. But having the rippling effect positively is what people, it's where the expectations always lie. Beyond all of these, they ask the questions of what have we been benefiting from? How are the jobs coming in? Where are the jobs? Where are the opportunities from these deals that have been signed? How do you explain that? You know, for people who understand how the work is done, especially in the aspect of diplomacy, but how do you begin to break down how Nigeria is benefiting in all these areas?
That's where I was actually going to land. You see, there are expectations and there are unrealistic expectations. People tend to, you know, just have this mindset that things should be done. It's about the here and now. Get this done. You know, it doesn't work that way. Economies don't work that way. International politics does not work that way. For a chunk of our people, I think there's a problem of misconception, mischaracterization. But for the other chunk, I think there's a mischief. Right? I think it's high time we begin to tell ourselves the truth. In as much as we have a crisis of too many reading and writing illiterates working amidst us, who are part of the chunk of our problems today in society, a lot of our people just refuse to understand. And the reality to your question is that, you see, the engagements, I am saying this against the backdrop of functions that I've attended, and people say, sorry to bring China into the conversation, and people say, yeah, but what have the Chinese done for us? Let the Chinese come and take our people to China and train them. It doesn't work that way. You know, you see, what drives every country is its national interest and national security. And that's why the likes of Hans Morgenthau and Kenneth Walt have argued in their power theory that, the international system will forever be chaotic because every country tends to be selfish and wants something for itself. No country is Father Christmas. You come to the negotiating table to have a conversation, and what you bring to the table is what will aid your conversation. So you're negotiating from one of three positions in every diplomatic engagement, from either from a position of strength, a position of weakness, or in no position at all. Countries are looking to exploit. It is a thing, you know. So I think it is important that we understand that these jobs are not just going to come overnight. They will come with time. As soon as the foreign direct investments begin to trickle in, not portfolio investments. Nigerians need to understand that what the president is doing there is to bring in actual foreign investment on the ground, where you see the spiral of industries and manufacture and so on and so forth, and that's going to yield result over the years.
Yeah, I was going to still bring you back to the issue you raised about Nigeria's strategic position on the continent, as the symbolic aspect of this state visits. Now, you talked about the scramble for Africa 2.0, but we'll say scramble for Nigeria in particular, because with our population and estimated population to hit the 300 million mark in the next few years, and the current issue of immigration, with most Nigerians now being compelled, being advised to come back home to really develop their country. With this that the president is doing, getting more deals, cutting deals, Africa, surely they toast Nigeria the target because of our population, youthful population. Where does this leave the youth out there who is still thinking it can make it? It cannot make it in Nigeria until it gets out there with these deals.
That's a diseased mindset. It's not really helpful where people have, you know, that thinking, that mindset around Japa, which is what we call it around here in the popular parlors. People need to begin to look beyond the surface to what is really happening virtually all the people, I've seen cases, we've investigated cases of people who leave this country after selling their father's house. Some people sell for 15 million, 20 million just to leave this country and go to Libya. What are you looking for in Libya? That's about a failed state, as you can get what a failed state is. So there are issues around mindset problem that we need to fix. And that's why often at times, you see, I make my categorization and I say our problems are not about the political systems. They're not about the macroeconomic policies, not as much as they are about two indices. One of them is a socio-economic issue where you have income inequality and the widening gap in wealth distribution. No question about that. It's happening. We've talked about that and we will talk about it. The gap is still wide. We need to close that gap, and government needs to do a lot in that respect. The second category is the social-psychological conditioning problem, the mindset problem. And this is where your conversation fits in perfectly. The issue of discipline, the issue of patriotism. When Lagarde was in this country, at the time she was the IMF country director, she told the president, Buhari then, God rest his soul, a number of things she felt we should do to rejig the economy and get it right. But one of the things, the key takeaway for me from that conversation was that she told the president, Mr. President, your people are a bunch of indisciplined lot. And Nigerians began to hit at her. You know how we are. Yes. We just leave the message and go to the messenger, rush, And for me, I looked at it and I asked myself, if without discipline, what can you achieve? Discipline is what tells you to stop at the red light.
Discipline is intertwined with patriotism.
Absolutely. So with this sort of mindset where people tend to demonize Nigeria and tend to, create a sort of narrative where it is assumed that nothing can work in the country, I think it's a wrong mindset. It's one that is not helpful. It's one that we need to begin to have a rethink around, because it costs this country 40 to 60,000 pounds in subsidy to train one medical doctor.
And then you see them.
And then the moment they graduate, they're looking for their way out of this country. I just told you 40% of medical doctors in OECD countries are from 4 African countries. In a country where the WHO has said we have 1 medical doctor to 5,000 patients and 1 bed to 10,000 patients.
But Prof, if people will argue to what you're saying, they'll tell you the system, the health system, the infrastructure, the gaps of, certain critical conditions we see in communities. But moving that aside, well, I like to pick on the diaspora engagement that Ayo mentioned, because if you're not engaging these diasporans who are Nigeria, and then we're seeing remittances, Nigeria is doing well in terms of remittances, but where the problem or challenge lies is where you're saying the gap, the skills gap, where people just want to leave for their own purpose and not thinking of, even beyond the remittances of funds, the skills you're giving back to your country is another aspect. And you agree with me, Prof, that a lot of Nigerians these days, the UK is the go-to place because of the perks that comes with through education. So how do we change that narrative? We saw the Minister of Information and National Orientation try to engage influencers and media practitioners there, to begin to paint a positive narrative about Nigerians, talking to the diasporans there. But looking at home, they say charity begins at home, because if they don't go there, you won't even have diasporans to engage in the first place. How do we begin to change that narrative?
Well, it requires, it's just like with all social problems that obviously do not have one root cause. The solutions are always multifaceted, they're multidimensional, multi-layered. And so the same applies to this. There's no silver bullet. For us to get this right, there's no question about the fact that when you look at the resources we have in the country, in commensurate terms, is it commensurate with the living standard in the country? Obviously, it's a no-no. There's no dispute about that. However, it takes us to get this to work. You go out there, you are going to be welcomed temporarily. This is yours. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you all perish in it together. And so it's high time we begin to, rethink our, our perspective and narrative around what is ours. We have always been very nonchalant. A chunk of our population that is around whatever is Nigerian. However, the bulk of the responsibility is with government. In the past, I used to be a proponent of the chunk of it with citizenry and all that. I've made a metamorphosis. I'm a changed man. The bulk of it is with government. The responsibility and honors to fix this lies with government. Now, image diplomacy diplomacy, like you mentioned, which is part of what the minister is doing, is a very important step in that direction. Recall that Muhammadu Buhari, God rest his soul, carried this country on his back through his image out there, you know, and so that's what image essentially does. The persona of the individual at the helm of affairs is very critical as well, and we all as Nigerians need to begin to think along that line, that we are all stakeholders in the Nigerian project. And when you carry the green passport, assume that you're that face, you're that persona, you're that individual, and how you project yourself out there is exactly the way you're going to be seen. Nigerians, if there's anything we sell, we outsource intellect, especially in the tech and fintech. We outsource intellect, and if we are seen to be that good, we should be able to harness, manage that resource back home and tend to shape things. However, like you mentioned earlier, the system appears to be rigged and broken, because the reality is, when you look at the infrastructure population ratio, it is nothing to write home about. This is the reality. We're faced with a gap of about 100 million housing deficit just for housing. A lot needs to be done. We need to begin to rethink our strategy as far as governance is concerned from the highest level. And when I talk about government, I need to state this very clearly and categorically. No meaningful development will come to this country without the subnationals. The state governors are, if not more important, in this conversation as the central government. Focus is always on the central government, but we need to begin to hold our leaders at the state and municipal and local level as accountable as we hold the central government.
All right, Prof, we have to pause. We need to take a break. We'll be back shortly, so do stay tuned. Thank you for staying tuned. The conversation is the UK-Nigeria relations. How do we build bridges for prosperity? Let's look at the soft power diplomacy. We know the First Lady is on this trip too. And of course, women have very strategic role to play. And you know, she has her own Renewed Hope initiative, which covers health, agric, education through her foundation. So, from your perspective, looking at her presence, you know, and this visit, how do you think that will also help amplify and support the Renewed Hope agenda, you know, in line with her Renewed Hope initiative?
I'm sure if the president had not gone with his wife, Queen Camilla, Queen Camilla would have shot him out of her house. Reality is, women play very significant roles as far as our economy is concerned. But again, of course, the UK also shares in part of the blame of taking the economy out of the hands of women with the Blake and Blair Extra Parliamentary Committee, which brought us the Structural Adjustment Program. However, that's in the past. Let our viewers not call us revisionist. But the reality is, women play a very significant role. The economy should be dictated by women, and this is what you find around the world. The visit, you know, involving the First Lady is even much more symbolic, because it portrays the need to amplify the voices of women, to ensure that a girl child is listened to prove to the world that, you know, on the team, the president recognizes the place of women and how powerful and instrumental their voices can be around the table in shaping the dynamics of the conversation, particularly as it relates to persuasion, right? And the areas you have just highlighted where the First Lady has built her initiative around, or her foundation around, is an initiative that is laudable, is one that, taken anywhere in the world today, will be received and embraced wholeheartedly. The president, like I said, in his strategic thinking, actually understands these dynamics. And so, you see, wherever you're having conversations today, particularly with development partners, this is an expo I'm giving. Ensure that you bring the issue of women and climate change to the front burner, and all other issues will be given attention. And so, it is very important, it is instructive, especially for a population where half the population are women. Empower women. Of course, you know, you have empowered an entire society. And so it is very, very important that women across all spectrum of both skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled are heard through the voice of the First Lady. And it speaks to the nature of the conversation, because you see, these state visits are not just about the the highest level of offices. You have people in the business spaces, in the fintech spaces. Everybody will want to be around the table to have a conversation, because everybody assumes there's a pie here and I have something to take from it or offer to it. So it speaks to how the president, carries and reveres the role of women, around that table. But typically or traditionally, he would have gone with the First Lady, should have gone with the First Lady, because she's somebody who is outspoken, she's somebody who knows her onions, she's somebody who has been around the corridors of power, and beyond that has held positions of authority that are very key and strategic and sensitive. And so bringing that experience to bear in or on a trip like this cannot be quantified, it cannot be measured, the sort of impact that that will have. She will be having conversations with captains of industries, development partners who would want to bring their resources into the country. And that soft spot which they would see, I believe, would yield positive results and will be a plus for women back home here.
Let's look at the issue of defense and security, which we expect the president to also get involved through the Minister of Defense, Christopher Musa, and having increase in terms of collaboration between the United Kingdom and Nigeria to combat the issues of insecurity, which is one major reason why some people have said they don't want to come back to Nigeria until the issue of insecurity is addressed and the health challenges and the rest. Now, we also saw in the lineup of events of Mr. President that our maritime infrastructure will get better with the agreement that will be signed. Now, all these will naturally fall under national security. Now, how do we expect this to turn out, considering that Nigeria never at the time was a part of the Warsaw Pact or NATO? How would this lead to, should I use the word prosperity in terms of our security, and also attracting people, like they love to say, if there's no security, I might not bring my investment?
Yeah, absolutely. Security has become an international problem. Today, there is no one country that is immune from either banditry, kidnapping, terrorism, or its likes. The internationalization of terrorism and its allied security threats is one that virtually all countries around the world face today. Nigeria's case is no peculiar case, it's no unique case. However, the amplification of this, again, I think I would at this point want to hold you people also responsible. The media is also further amplifying this narrative. Not when I say you people, I don't mean NTA.
No.
Thank you for that correction.
Clarification.
Right, so
yes.
Both the traditional media and, of course, the new media is also not very helpful in terms of portraying the nature of insecurity, the scale of insecurity across the breadth of this country. But this is not to take away the fact that we're faced with or grappling with enormous insecurity around the country. Now, with what is happening around the world and Nigeria's visit, I think we need this visit more than ever before to ensure that, one, we begin to tap into the experiences of countries that are advanced in terms of military warfare, in terms of military capabilities, in terms of intelligence gathering, and so on and so forth. It is crucial. However the rest of the world wants to see us at this point in time, the reality is, as far as the tussle, the power politics going on around the world, Nigeria has always maintained its neutrality through the non-alignment. The non-alignment posture is still very much prevalent till present. But what we're trying to do is, on the bilateral level, ensure that we continue to engage with countries that have our interest at heart, to ensure that we take from their experiences, to ensure that we learn from the things that they know, to ensure that we align our position in terms of sharing across board, intelligence, sophistication of military hardware, and so on and so forth, so that way we can further boost and enhance our security posture. It is not enough for us to say the United States has sent boots on the ground and that solves the problem. We need to go out there and ensure that we continue to align with forces, especially at a time where multilateralism is beginning to take the back stage and ultra-nationalist figures such as Donald Trump and so on and so forth are beginning to say me first, and so on and so forth. At that time, we Nigeria, like I said earlier, speaking for not just the country or continent, but for the black race, need to amplify our voice across the world and ensure that we bring these various parties back to the negotiating table, back to the table where we can have a conversation and talk about collective global security. Because like I said, what we're witnessing today is not peculiar to us, and it's not something that we created. It is as a result of the fallout of the global security issues, the global governance deficits, that we are paying this cost, that we are bearing the brunt. Recall what happened in Libya. The fallout of Muammar Gaddafi led to the spread of small arms and light weapons, over 500 million of them, because the man was armed to the teeth. And as soon as that regime fell, arms were making their way through sub-Saharan Africa into West Africa and into Sambisa. An AK-47 that should sell for no less than 300,000 is selling for 17,000 in the bush. So these are some of the, the narratives that our people need to understand, that we can't do it alone. No country has ever been able to do it alone. Even Algeria, where they used the non-kinetic approach to address it, they were able to achieve 99% success because it was an ethnic tension. The militias rose as a result of whether perceived or real marginalization. And so they took that up. How do you negotiate with Boko Haram when you do not know what their objectives are? Clearly, that is. And so it is important that we begin to, change these narratives ourselves first and foremost. But we're suffering. We're faced with this hard, the hard choice of remaining, or like a lot of this, or some of these people are doing, withdrawing and just leaving altogether. 100,000 hectares of land have been abandoned in northern Nigeria, the place that is supposed to be the food basket of the country. And we want to talk about food security. It's going to be almost impossible. So more needs to be done.
Let's hope the fallout, of this visit. We saw the Minister of Defense there, and I'm sure that's even critical to this engagement.
Absolutely. And we must give Christopher Musa kudos for the effort he's been making since assuming office as the minister. He's been able to block certain leakages and ensure that some gaps are filled. However, this is something that mutates. It's not something that you can handle overnight.
Okay, which brings me to the Invictus Games, which was founded by Prince Harry in 2014. We saw him in the country last year because of this same game, another visit. But we're seeing the impact, especially for wounded soldiers, giving them a sense of belonging, a renewed kind of hope. It's already saying a lot, having the UK, have this game replicated in Nigeria. If we have to look at the impact so far, in the lives of this personnel, these veterans who have been impacted. Because I watched the documentary of some of the personnel who have lost one limb or arm or something, sharing their story when they were serving. Really heart-touching. And the Invictus game is more like a sense of hope for them again. Where do you see that silver lining, with this bridge we're talking about between Nigeria and UK?
Well, I think that's one of the aspects or areas that attention should be paid to even more. A couple of weeks ago, if not a month ago, I was invited to the National Institute for International Affairs in Lagos to deliver a paper on image diplomacy. And as a result of as a fallout of what the minister is trying to do, a group, not the minister now, spoke to me about that, and we had a very robust engagement. And it is to ensure that people are given a sense of belonging, to ensure that people are carried along and they feel as part of the process, as part of the whole. Because you see, the thing about the mind is it has a way of playing tricks on us. And so when people have a perception buried within them that they're not important, they're not carried along, it sends a shockwave, and then you begin to see people act in a certain weird way that is antisocial. It all stems from the mind. Harry himself, being a veteran, understands that idea and the ideals of bringing that darkness out of these people. And so he's trying to use that platform to ensure that this is achieved. And it has become an institution, because around the world it's been embraced today. It's no longer just the childbirth of an individual or just a group of persons. And you see, these are areas where government needs to, we should have seen the sport minister also tag along in this entourage. Yes, of course, you can't carry everybody at the same time. to further deepen the conversation around the sports sector, like I was trying to mention earlier. It's an economy where when we tap into, we will see that the ripple effect, it starts almost immediately.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are carried onto the platform at the same time, people with the potentials, people who they see as having the skills and so on and so forth. And this is what we're trying to build, to ensure that it's not just about certificates alone. Because you see, the reality is, any economy where the government and the banks are the highest employers of labor will hit the brick wall. Their role is not to employ. Their role is to stimulate the economy and to ensure that foreign direct investments comes in and that the private sector plays its role as the private sector to ensure that people are employed, to ensure that people are engaged. That's what the private sector is naturally supposed to do. So thanks to Dangote and Dangote Refinery and its subsidiaries for the good work that they're doing. So the sports sector is one arena where we can actually leverage on very quickly. It's a low-hanging fruit where we can, further deepen that or replicate what the Invictus game is actually trying to achieve or has been achieving over the years. And that way I believe that we will be able to find healing amongst our people much faster than a psychologist will sit or a shrink will sit and try to have a conversation.
Because you're giving them a sense of belonging.
Absolutely. And it engages people, and when people are engaged, they tend to forget a certain aspect of them that is hurting, at least momentarily, but it's very helpful. But beyond that, we've talked about its impact to the economy, and it is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to.
From me, how close are we to the Asian years where Nigeria and UK were like brothers and sisters, where there were no visa restrictions, where there were cultural exchange, proper cultural exchange, where there was educational exchange, health exchange. I know, because I'm from Ibadan, I know the University College in Ibadan used to be home to so many medical professionals. But nowadays it's a different narrative. Now, with this visit, do we possibly look forward to it? Can we possibly look forward to a time where there will be fewer restrictions on Nigerians going to the UK applying for visa compared to what we have right now?
Beyond the Japa syndrome.
Beyond the Japa syndrome and so many other things surrounding the bottlenecks that never existed onto strained relationship between Nigeria and the UK.
Well, that's a long shot. That's a very tall order.
Okay, so you have to answer that briefly because we're wrapping up.
You see, this visit is one in a whole. The things we've talked about here, we must understand that there are short, medium to long-term achievements in all of those things that we've enumerated around this table. What you have talked about is one of the things that are futuristic and an area that we need to begin to rejuvenate because it was there in the past. We saw it in the past. Now, the questions to be asked is what went wrong in between? We must tell ourselves the truth. The crime profile of Nigerians in the UK is not very helpful at this time. And this is where, again, like I said, I return to image diplomacy. And that's why the Chinese are very keen about people-to-people exchanges. For people at the grassroots, at the lowest level, to understand one another is very crucial. It's very key because it removes certain stereotypes and barriers that allows the institutions to freely engage with one another. But where there's panic at the lowest level, it's not very helpful. Institutions themselves react to that panic. This is how institutions work. So I think a lot more needs to be done. Nigerians, we ourselves need to understand and embrace Nigeria as our project and project it to the rest of the world as something that is marketable and sellable, something that the world should see for what it is, and not the narrative, the mischaracterized narrative that certain individuals or pundits, for trying to achieve whatever goal, are trying to project Nigeria to the rest of the world, either as being genocidal or whatever. It's not very helpful. We need to begin to look away from that.
I wish we could go on with the conversation. We have different aspects to touch, maritime, agriculture, but we have to leave the conversation there. And let's wait to see, of course, outcomes in the near future of this historic visit. Thank you so much, Professor Mukhtar Imam. Thank you for your time on platform. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well done for the good job you're doing.
Thank you.
Ayodeji Makinde, thank you so much for being on platform.
Thanks so much. We also expect a full basket of opportunity.
Indeed. All right. So the conversation has been on Nigeria-UK relations, building bridges for prosperity. More importantly, beyond this bilateral ties, as a true true Nigerian patriotism should be a watchword. It's time for us to begin to look within on what we can sell to the rest of the world by being the true Nigerian. Nigeria first for me, any day, anytime. And that's Platform. I'm Ruth Aguele.